Okay. So with Godot, there's a bunch of different options for exporting. We can actually make a web playable version of the game, but we're going to make an executable file just so we can see what that looks like. And it'll run better than a web-based version of the game anyway. When you're ready to export, just make sure you've saved everything, and then we're going to go to project settings and double check. There's a couple settings that we want to check on project settings. So we may have gone over these already, but we're just going to double check. So in the general section under project settings, under run, we want to make sure to set the main scene. This is the first scene that's going to appear when you launch the game. And so we want to make sure that that is the start menu, or whatever you want it to be. So we want to double check that. The other thing we want to do is look at the window under the display section. And there's two things that you're going to want to take a look at. So there's a default width and height to the game. You can change this if you want. Godot has this kind of default of 1152 by 648. I'm not exactly sure what that's based on, but that's their default size. If you're happy with that size, just leave this. If you want something else, you can adjust those. The one I want to focus on is this resizable parameter. By default, your Godot window in the game will be resizable. I recommend turning this off, especially with a 2D game. That way, whatever the game launches at is where the player is going to play the game. If you have designed it in a way that resizable works, you can leave that on. But I recommend turning that off just so you don't have to worry about the game dimensions changing, when the player is playing it. There's also a option for the mode. The default mode is windowed. That means that it just is a window in the on the computer with like a bar at the top, just like any other window. But you can set it to be full screen or maximized or whatever as well. Again, for this project, I think the good settings here are just to leave windowed and change resizable to default to off. Another setting that you might want to look at, this is under advanced settings. Whoops. So you won't see this unless you turn on advanced settings. There's a setting for allow HDPI or high DPI. This is for like high density screens. Yeah. What? Yeah. Yeah. No worries. So I turn this off, so it'll just show the art sort of at the resolution. It'll size the art up to match whatever the density is. You may want to leave this on depending on how you've designed your art, but I think for most of us, turning this off is probably going to be better. Everything else we can pretty much leave as default. But I don't know. There's a bunch of other settings, so if you have questions about any of those, let me know. So once we've checked those settings and we saved all of our scenes and we've tested the game and make sure it works, we're ready to export. So to export, we just go to Project and go to Export. And then here, you're going to have to add different build styles that you want, or build settings that you want. So if you click on Add, you get different platforms. Since you may be working on Windows or Mac, but everybody is working on different machines. So what we want to do is actually do a build for both to give everybody the option to play it. You can do a web build as well as you want. But as I mentioned, the web build is probably not going to run quite as well as the application build. So I'm not going to go over that, but if you want to add a web build, you can. So I'm going to add Mac, and I'm going to add Windows. And so I can build for both platforms from either platform. So even though I'm on a Mac, I'll still be able to make a Windows build. The thing that's going to come up when you try to make a build, you'll see some red text down here, unless you happen to have done this. You need to download some build templates. So if you haven't done that yet, you can just click on this link here, and you'll be able to download these templates. And so you can see I have actually some older versions here, but they're not the most recent versions, so we can just delete those. And normally this takes like 2 seconds, but our internet is kind of slow here. So while this is going, let's see if we can go back to our export. Okay. So while we're waiting for that to happen, let's just go over some of the settings here. So you can name the build, and then you definitely want to turn on options, and then we want to set a path, the export path. That's where the build is going to show up. So you can click on here, and we don't want to put the build in the main project folder because we don't want it to be a part of the game assets. It's the game itself. So what we want to do is go up one to our Godot folder, and then you can either put it here, or normally what I like to do is add a builds folder like that, and then I'll just put the builds in there. With the Mac build, you're just going to get a single file, so we can just put the file directly in there, and that's going to be fine. So I'm going to click save here. Or no, we need to give it a file name. So I'm just going to call this my game Mac build. You can call it really whatever you want, as long as you remember what it is, and just click save. So that's going to be where it's going to save. Then there's one thing that you have to do for the Mac build to work. You have to give it a bundle identifier. This is just like a unique name that only your game has, that Apple uses to like track different products. Mostly, they usually look something like this. It's kind of a reverse URL. COM at the beginning of this stands for commercial. And so a lot of times you'll see like the bundle identifier for like if it's like, you know, Spotify will be like com.spotify. whatever. For us, it really doesn't actually matter what we put here because we're not going to be publishing this anywhere, you know, like the App Store or anything like that. So I'm just going to put my.game. I'll just say fall 24. That'll be a good unique identifier to use. And that's pretty much it. There's other settings that you can do here if you want to, but you don't really need to. So let's see if our thing is downloaded. So these settings will stay the same. So if I close this, we can come back. Oh, it's still downloading. Okay, it's going very slow. So while that's going, let's look at another thing that you can do. So one of the things that's built in here is the icon. And if you want your game to have your own icon, Godot has this icon.svg that's sort of the default icon. And when we export the game, that's the icon it's going to have if we don't replace it. But you might want to have your own icon. So if we go to our project folder, let's go to Godot and go to my game. We could make our own icon. So we could go to our sprites and choose maybe what would be a nice icon, maybe our character. Let's open this up in Piskel and just export one frame from it. So let's see, our icon is, they changed it to an SVG. It used to be a PNG. That's interesting. Let's open this up in Illustrator. Or whoops, I clicked Atom by mistake. Let's see. This is still downloading. Usually this literally takes 2 seconds, but not in here. Yeah. Okay, so let's... Oh, I keep clicking on the wrong thing. I don't want Atom. Okay, let's open this with Illustrator. Okay, let's see. Okay, so there's the Godot icon. And let's see how big this is. So I'm gonna go to View, and let's see, Rulers, show rulers. Okay, so it's not that big. It's approximately, it's 128 by probably 128. Okay. So let's export a copy of our character art at 128 by 128. So I'm gonna throw this guy back on here. I think it's 64 by 64. And I'm just gonna delete all these frames and just take this first frame and export it, and I'll scale it up to 128 by 128. and download that. Okay, so now I have this character.png. I'm just going to name this icon.png, and we're going to throw it in here. And then we'll see if we can replace that. I don't know why Adam won't quit. Okay, okay, whatever. I'll look at that later. Okay, 77%, we're getting there. Okay, let's go back to our project settings and see if we can find our icon. Okay, so there's a setting here for the icon. So we can choose the image that we just created as our icon instead of the default icon. Still got some time left on this guy. Okay. All right, so while we're waiting for this, let's go ahead and open up itch.io because that's where we're gonna eventually publish this. So I'm gonna open up itch.io and create a new project. So I'm gonna go to upload new project, and I'm gonna call this my game. And I'll put my Godot game here. You can obviously just put the name of the game that you want here. We can upload a cover image. So maybe I'll choose my icon again, or maybe I'll choose one of my sprites, or maybe the snake, something like that. Where's the flower? This is going to look like a sprite sheet, so it's going to look a little goofy, but it's kind of cool. And then this is going to be a downloadable, so not an HTML like we've done previously. We're going to set the in development status. We're going to set no payments. And then here we're going to upload, and we'll upload both a Mac build and a Windows build eventually. And then we can add a little description. Check out my game made with Godot. We can add a genre if we want, maybe platformer. And some tags. Godot is going to be a tag, so you could add that in there. Okay, so we're all ready. Let's see if we can actually export. It's almost done. Okay, I think we've covered all the settings and stuff, so we're just gonna have to wait. All right. Any questions while we're waiting for this to finish? Okay, there we go. So let's go back. Now that we've downloaded our Mac build, let's see if we can, oh, it's still not letting us export. Okay. This is a new error that I haven't seen before. This might be for the new editor. It says, cannot export a universal blah, blah, blah. Enable project settings, rendering, textures, VRAM compression, import. Okay, let's see if we can do that. So, I don't have a lot of resolution on my screen, so I'll have to try to fit these next to each other. Okay, so we have to go to rendering. Okay, that's down here. Oh no, it's this main section. Okay, so rendering. Okay, then textures. Textures. Then VRAM compression, that's right here, and then import etc astc. I don't really know what this means, but I think if we save this setting, hopefully that will clear that error. So if you run into that when you export, okay. So there we go. If you see yellow stuff, you might want to fix that, but you don't need to, so we're going to ignore that for now. And so now we're going to export the project. So we click export here, and we can see it's going to make what's called a DMG file, which you've probably seen before if you used Mac. It just allows us to download the application. Then you can either turn on or off export with debug. I'll show you what this means in a moment. But I'm going to turn it on since we're still debugging. So we'll save this, and this should go relatively fast. And once it's done exporting, when we go back to the Finder and go to our builds folder, you're going to see this Mac build.dmg, and that's what you're going to upload to itch.io. Before you do that, let's make sure it actually works. We don't want to have people download a game that doesn't run. So let's double click it and open it. And here's what you're going to see. You're going to see the game app itself, which should have the icon if you added it, and it should be named after whatever you called it, and then this mygame.command. So if I just run this, if I double click on it, it should just run since it's from my own computer. If you download somebody else's game, your Mac is probably going to tell you that you're not allowed to play it. And what you need to do to get around that is what you right click on the game and then click open. And you actually have to do that twice. It doesn't like the first time you do it, it kind of, I guess it thinks that you're not being serious. If you do it again, then it'll let you do it. So let's test and make sure this works. Not sure if the sound works, but the visuals work. I don't hear any sound, but it seems to work otherwise. I'll figure out what's going on with that later. But that works. The other thing, if you turn on debug, you'll get this second file called mygame.command. You wouldn't want to distribute this, but if you're debugging, if you run this, it's going to run the console in the background. And so if you get errors in your game, you'll see them here. So it's kind of like when you're actually in Godot, the little output down here, you can actually see that in a terminal window. And so if your game has errors, you may want, like if you start the game and it runs but suddenly it crashes or it won't open, you'll be able to see errors in here. And so if we run the game, oh, now the sound works. It's actually not logging anything, so that's good. That means I don't have any errors. It's unusual. Usually you get errors the first time you export. But it looks like it's pretty good. But that's what you would want to use if you do run into any errors. Okay, so we've got our Mac build. Let's upload this. So we're going to go to itch.io, upload files, and we'll go to builds and upload our Mac build. I already have that URL, so let's change the URL to my Godot game. Okay, let's try uploading again. And then we just want to select which type of build this is. So we are going to click on the little Apple build there. Then we can do a Windows build. So we'll go to Windows. We'll choose a different export, or we'll choose the export path again. So remember, we don't want it to be inside the game folder with our audio and our scripts and everything. We want to go back to our Godot project folder and go to our builds folder. With the Windows project, you're actually going to get 2 files. And so what I recommend doing here is making a folder just for Windows, which will make it easier to organize. So I'm going to make a new folder and call this My Game Windows Build. I'm going to click OK. So I didn't do this for the Mac because I just get that one DMG file. For my Windows build, I want to make an extra folder. So I'm going to save that. Let's give it a name first. My Windows Build. Okay. So with this one, there aren't as many settings. We do have to set the icon here. There's actually an error. There's a thing here that says the RC edit tool must be configured in editor settings, export Windows RC edit to change the icon or app information data. I'm going to ignore that for now. Let's not worry about the icon. Or actually, let's just set the icon and just see if it works. But it may not. But the icon is not the most important thing. I don't think we have to set anything else here. So I'm just going to go ahead to export project. And you'll see it's going to say mywindowsbuild.exe. You have the same option to export with debug, although of course I can't run it on a Mac computer. But you might want to download it on a Windows computer and debug there. Okay, so now we have this Windows build, and you can see this has multiple files. It has the exe, which is the executable file, and then it has the pack file. So the exe is most of the game engine. It's 84 megabytes. The pack file is like all of our assets, like the scripts and the art and stuff. That's only 900K. But these guys need to go together. So to upload a Windows build, we can't, if we just upload the executable, it's not gonna work when somebody downloads it and try to run it. I hope that you guys hear me say that, because otherwise you're gonna upload an executable and it's not gonna run and we're gonna have to go do it again. But that's what's gonna happen. What we have to do instead is zip these guys together. That's why I created the extra folder. If you didn't create an extra folder, that's fine. Just select the two files and then compress them together. But if you made a folder, just right click on the folder and compress, or make an archive on Windows, and you'll get a little folder here. These should be relatively the same size. The Mac build is 60 megabytes. The Windows build is 30 megabytes. So that's pretty reasonable. If your game build is like 500 megabytes or something like that, it's probably too big. So if you see your build is really large, if it's over 100 megabytes, I would say for this project, then there's probably something that's not quite right. So let me know and we can try to figure out what's going on there. But it should be around, 30 to 100 megabytes is pretty reasonable. Okay, so let's upload our Windows build. So I'm gonna upload again, and I'm gonna upload this entire zip folder. And we're gonna select the Windows icon here and then click save. And so now when we look at the project page, you'll see the download options for both. And so obviously whichever platform you're on, you can download the project for that platform. We won't do Linux. I don't think anybody's on Linux, but we can if somebody wants to do a Linux build. And if you want to do a web build, you can try that as well, but it may not work as well as the regular build. And yeah, that's everything for exporting. Once you've done all this, the other thing that you want to do, within reason, of course, is actually download the file and make sure it works. For class, obviously, we're going to practice, and if it doesn't work, I'll let you know. But if you're trying to actually distribute a game and have other people play it, if they download it and they can't run it, they're going to think you're, an amateur, and they're not going to appreciate your work. So we want to download and make sure we can actually run the game. Of course, I'm on Mac, so I'll only be able to run the Mac version. Okay, so I downloaded the game that I just uploaded. I'm gonna open this DMG and double click. And this is what you're gonna see if you download somebody else's game, or your own game if you've already uploaded it. It says the Mac won't let you open this. So you say okay, then right click and open. And it's gonna do it one more time, and we can click open, and now it should run. Okay, so that looks good. And that's it. So I'll stop there.